Call the work session order for November 3rd, 2025. Please read the roll call, City Clerk.
Let the record reflect that all members are present.
Thank you. We have one item on the agenda tonight. I'd like to remind council that staff will be pausing every so often to answer any questions. The item is to receive an update on the zoning ordinance comprehensive review. Please introduce yourselves.
Good evening, Mayor Pizzolo and Council. My name is Christian Williams. I'm the Planning Manager here with the City of Goodyear. And alongside me is Principal Planner Guadalupe Ortiz-Cortez, who's really the project lead on these zoning ordinance update efforts. We also have alongside us Matt Kleiserko. He's with Michael Baker International. And in the audience is Robbie Aaron, who works alongside Matt. And we're here to give you a brief update on our status in updating the zoning ordinance and get direction on recommendations related to the topic area. Before we get started, though, I want to show you a physical copy of the zoning ordinance that Guadalupe is holding. The zoning ordinance was last written in 1999. Just to take you back a little bit to 1999, typewriters existed. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets was released. Blackberries were a thing. Floppy disks were a thing. Game Boy Color was released. Bank One was a bank. We took pictures with these and not our cell phones, and paper magazines existed. So this is how long it's been. So when you see terms like tannery or things like that in the zoning ordinance, you kind of have an idea of why and how long it's been since we've comprehensively done. I'll just leave this here. So here we are on the timeline. We kicked off those efforts back in January of this year, and in March, Council had one-on-one sessions with staff to give us some feedback and some direction, preliminary direction on where you guys had interest in the zoning ordinance taking us. In April, we met with the Goodyear community, and we had some community workshops over at the Goodyear Recreation Campus, and we also met with our development community through a series of roundtables that happened in June. We're currently starting the drafting process of the zoning ordinance, starting with some of the feedback we received from your one-on-ones, such as parking, industrial development heights, streamlining the process, and middle housing. And many of those efforts staff believes we have pretty good direction on based on some of the zonings you've approved and that feedback. But tonight we're seeking direction on select topic areas, which will allow our project team to move forward with the development of additional drafts that we will be releasing closer to the beginning of next year. And after the work session, we're also happy to schedule any additional one-on-one sessions or have any more thorough topic discussions with y'all as you guys so see it fit. Tonight, we're not making any decisions. It's really about getting general guidance for staff so that we can continue those work efforts to write the zoning ordinance. And of course, we'll return to you in the spring with some more comprehensive drafts for you guys to review and give us more feedback on. And that will occur in spring of 2026. Also remind you that according to your 2025-2028 strategic plan, we are tasked as staff to review and rewrite that zoning ordinance, and that should take place before the fiscal year ends 2026. So now with that, I will tell you about the 4 topic areas we'd like some additional feedback on tonight. Those topic areas are reflecting both community feedback and your internal feedback. First topic we'd like to discuss is temporary signage in multifamily zoning. We'll look at how the temporary signs are used in multifamily developments and consider updates to definitions, placement, and duration. Enhancing neighborhood or noticing requirements. We'll explore how the city's current public notification practices compare to state law and other cities, and discuss some ideas on how to potentially improve those outreach efforts. Permitted versus special use and use permit uses. We'll review select uses that currently require permits and evaluations, whether we could streamline some of those processes or allow some uses by right if certain conditions are met. And then lastly, we'll talk about opportunities for new housing types. We'll discuss how select zoning districts may be expanded to accommodate select housing conditions and or types to respond to the evolving housing needs and also to get ahead of some of the state legislation that comes our way. So with that, we're going to start our topic with temporary signage in multifamily districts. And this topic has surfaced as an area needing clarification and potential updates. Specifically, members of the council in their one-on-ones have asked the city to evaluate how we compare to others and look at how we might do some enhancements in that area. Before we get into signage, I do just want to highlight some high-level areas with multifamily. Based on research and outreach to our friends in neighborhood services, we've looked at our apartment communities and how they are doing health-wise. The median occupancy rate in Goodyear apartments is at 95%, meaning that less than 5% of units are typically vacant. And this is great news for attracting and keeping our workforce in Goodyear and gaining new retail opportunities. And as you'll recall from a past presentation from our director, Katie Wilkin, several years ago, and is evident in this chart, back in 2015, 9% of our housing was multifamily. And at that time in her presentation in 2021, she noted that about 13% of our housing stock had been multifamily. And she made a prediction that 18% of our housing stock would be multifamily in 2025. And she must be a genie in a bottle because that did come true. And now that we've reviewed the issues related to multifamily standards, and you have an idea of how our occupancy rates are doing, I'll turn it over to Matt to go into more details on what we found.
Great. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, council, for the opportunity to chat this afternoon or evening. But what we wanted to get into, now that Christian gave us a little bit of understanding of the status of multifamily in Goodyear, I wanted to talk a little bit about the issues that we're addressing relative to signage for this specific use type, multifamily. And so, of course, we are talking about temporary signage. So that is not permanent signage, right? So as we look at these images, the image on the left there has two signs on it. One is a temporary sign, an A-frame sign. The other is a permanent sign. And so what we wanted to discuss is focusing on those temporary applications, not the permanent applications. So with that context in mind, one of the first issues we're looking at is just the variation in the types of signage that there are, right? We have A-frame signs, we have banner signs that are at the top of the building. And so understanding the different applications first of where those may present themselves so that we can analyze and consider all of those nuances. One of the other things that we're wanting to make sure that we look at are the placement of those signs, of course. And so in addition to just the size of them, the type, it's where are they placed? Are they in a landscaped island at the top of a building, at the base of the building, out by the sidewalk? All of those variations are also things that we wanted to keep in mind as we look at temporary signage. We'll go to the next slide. So now that we have an understanding of the issues in place, the notion of the temporary aspect of it, the placement and the type, of course, we also want to then understand what does Goodyear require today from a temporary sign standpoint. And this is a very generalized capture of what Goodyear addresses. Goodyear has many different temporary sign types and different regulations for those various applications. But comprehensively, overall, generally the size of signs is limited to 32 square feet or less. The placement, as you can see, it's all kind of relative to safety, right? That we can't interfere or create hazards. So we can't be in the sidewalks, we can't block site visibility and those types of things. Duration. Duration does vary on the application of the sign type, but relatively we're looking at between 10 and 30 days is the time frame for most of Goodyear's temporary sign placements. And then some of those sign types, so some of the temporary signs can be placed without a permit. Others do require a permit in order to be located, and especially if the permit is requesting, a modification of those baseline conditions, whether it's the duration, placement, or size. So we went through that, of course, Then we looked at all the benchmark communities across the valley that we could compare to. As you can imagine, as Christian went through the history of Goodyear's zoning ordinance, all other communities have different ways that they break out temporary signs, that they manage temporary signs. So we didn't want to confuse this slide by trying to explain how they all look at them differently, but we started to compare how do we look relative to size. And we were comparable in most of the benchmark communities relative to that 32 square feet in size. The duration, Goodyear at 10 to 30 days is generally in concert with other communities. There are some that are a little more flexible from 30 to 60 days as a temporary condition as opposed to 10 to 30. But overall, again, we're on par with some of those other communities. Placement, there's pretty standard across the board. Placement is focused on safety and making sure that it's not excessive in the application of those temporary signs. And then the permitting process itself. Yes, across the board, some communities do, and most align with signs that are allowed without a permit, and those signs that may require a permit because they're larger, they're more prominent, that type of thing. So we were encouraged to see that there was general alignment with the existing applications that Goodyear utilizes from a temporary sign standpoint for multifamily, that is. So now with all of those variations, we wanted to say, what is it that Goodyear needs to do in order to make sure that conditions like this do not occur in the city? And so what you see on the left-hand side with the X's is the number of temporary signs that exist on one street frontage. The other sign on the right-hand side that you see at the top of the building might be difficult to see, and that's kind of the point, is it's faded and is not really serving a purpose at this application. And so we challenged based on the review, what recommendations might be utilized to ensure that these conditions don't exist. And when we compared and analyzed, it really comes down to enforcement. And so as you can see on this slide, we're not recommending any specific changes relative to how Goodyear applies temporary signs for multifamily because that it has the bumpers that address some of these situations, whether it be the placement or the duration or the quality of it. But we also want to make sure that we're being practical and not overreaching in terms of our regulations. So with that, I will pause to see if Mayor or Council has any questions or comments relative to how the city manages temporary signs and or anything that you might like to qualify moving forward.
I see Trey.
Sure, I guess I'll get it started. I know this is for multifamily, but how does our policy for multifamily compare to commercial businesses? Now open for a restaurant or something like that. Or is that in your purview? Do you know that, or Christian? I don't know if that's for you, but I'm curious, if we're allowing multifamily to put up big banners, but we don't let other residential or businesses do something similar, and if not, why not?
I could start, and Christian can maybe take it from there. The city actually does a good job and does allow commercial uses to have temporary signage. Now, as you can imagine, the different applications from those, whether it be for multifamily, and so you have different building types and placement, whereas commercial, you might have temporary signage in a window, and so then you're talking about the coverage of how much of that window, whereas in a multifamily situation, you might not see something like that happen as much. So absolutely, Goodyear does have allowances for temporary signs in a commercial setting. Yep.
I think that's all I have off the top of my head.
Anybody else? Benina?
So as we get more and more multifamily in Goodyear, there may be an instance where a apartment complex is not filling up as fast or as they would require? Do you allow temporary signage longer periods of time?
And I think that's absolutely something that we want to contemplate in this situation. As Christian mentioned, Goodyear is in a good place in terms of the filling up the existing multifamily. But we want to be practical in applications, understanding in those situations where there may need to be more advertisement to get tenants. So that was one of the notions that we were recognizing when we evaluated that Goodyear has a 10 to 30 day, whereas other communities have 30 to 60. And should we possibly maybe consider different situations for sign length relative during construction versus occupancy, for example. So we would be interested to hear council's thoughts on such a situation.
Go ahead.
Oh, I have thoughts on that.
Great.
So it was mentioned that this was a request by council, and I will tell you it was generated from the fact that when we go to tour these facilities or go to their ribbon cuttings and things, the leasing agents consistently report that as soon as they've hit that window of time, their traffic just drops off. I mean, they've made a sizable investment in this huge project, and all of a sudden they see a noticeable change in their ability to have people come in and lease. And I see that we did get an attachment, so we were compared to 5 Valley cities. And we are probably the most conservative in terms of the 10 to 30 days. We're comparable in size and placement, but I would like to consider an expanded grace period to actually be more in line with the other cities. And I think by doing a temporary grace period doesn't mean that you're going to end up with what you're picturing here, which tell me these are not Goodyear projects.
Correct.
Okay, because we haven't seen these. But I don't think it's like, well, nothing or short amount of time are you going to end up with this. I think we could contemplate an enhanced window for them to consider opportunities to attract people to their business. So thank you.
Do you have something?
I do, thank you. Can I say something about the ordinances to Christian? So as you review all of these ordinances, are you making a list of what needs to be thrown out and which ones we're gonna keep? Or are we just gonna keep adding to that book there?
This book's getting completely rewritten
Okay,
from scratch.
that's very encouraging. I would be in favor of us having maybe 2 windows, 10 to 30, 30 to 60, or 10 to 30, 45 to 60 or 70 or something like that. If we are actually, for all of our apartments, 95% occupied, there's only a 5% that's empty. And I don't recall too many apartments that are still waiting to come online. Am I correct, Mayor?
No, not too many right now.
Yeah, and so I know we have had before this council many conversations about putting flags out, balloons out, flowers out to draw attention to their whatever they're trying to sell or have customers come in, hairdressers, whatever. I know that some of the apartments are putting out the balloons, and I think they look very attractive. They're not nuisance, and they're not. I don't think they interfere with traffic, and I think they're just trying to be creative on their own to entice people to come in and look at what they have. So I'm glad you're redoing it, and I'm glad we're taking a look, and I'm glad we're comparable to everyone else, because I would hate to be way out front and then have our apartments not look like what we want them to look like. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, some of the similar to the same things here. So, yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, I want the business owners to be able, the apartment owners to be able to attract people to their apartment complexes. So, whatever time-bound versions of that you think is comparable to other cities, I think that's fine. But when it comes to code compliance and keeping them up too long, I just want to make sure that we're able to follow that because I don't want them to come into disrepair and look like there's a blowout sale for the last 10 years. That's not good. So yeah, so just to make sure they look good, and that even if they are the temporary signage, that it's high quality, that looks good how they're doing it. I don't know how to define high quality, but just to be able to just show that it's a good place, that people want to come there, and then it's good to attract those kind of users. And I know we're only talking about multifamily right now. We're not talking about other uses for that, but yeah, but I think the business owners, which are the apartment complex owners, should be able to advertise, but like I said, to a time-bound, predetermined one that's reasonable for them. So that's all I have. So thank you.
Vicky?
Have you guys had any issues with businesses in town? Maybe we've told them they can have certain signs, and then we've told them we can't have certain signs. I have a couple of businesses that have come to me, and one is a Mexican place, and they have just about been fed up because their business has taken a huge hit because of it, because somebody from the city told them that they could have signage of a certain caliber, and then they came back in and said they couldn't. And so they've been kind of given maybe three different ideas. And he is, this particular guy is planning on he's opening a big place in Phoenix right now. He has a small place here, but he's hoping to open a bigger place here. And I can talk to Katie about this later, but I don't want to scare him away because we're kind of not being consistent with what we're saying to him, and he has seen a drop in his business because of it. So can we kind of check on that and the consistency and how we're dealing with some of these businesses, because that's really not fair.
Maybe we can touch base, find out who this is and how
I've talked to you about it before.
so we can follow up on it.
Great, because we've been trying to do that with him, and he's seen a real drop in business.
You know, I like to just piggyback on what Laura was talking about. Some of the problems is I was in the other day in an apartment complex going down the road, and they're complaining because with the balloons or the tethered ones that they set up, you drive right by his place and he doesn't even know he's renting. They don't even see it. So I think some of the signs are really kind of important as well. And also, you know, when you've got them right next to each other and they're maybe 15% leased out after, I don't know, 15, 30 days, and all of a sudden, you know, like Laura mentions, when that happens and the signs go away, business drops off. So I think we need to be a little more flexible on that. We're willing to go 30, 60 days, okay? And then even take a second look if all of a sudden their rent is well below the average threshold. We want to make it so that we're business friendly in there when it comes to that kind of stuff. We don't want to discourage. Now, I don't want signs all over the place, don't get me wrong, but we want the businesses to be able to at least let people know that they are leasing this particular business. You know, so if you're riding down the street and all you see is you just passed it because they have no signage out front to be able to see the balloon, we've got to figure out a way to address that issue. So I'm with Laura. I'd like to see a little longer. 15 to 30, that's not enough time. It really isn't, because sometimes it takes them a while to get these things started. So, okay? Everybody okay to move on to the next one?
Yep.
Okay.
I'll begin by mentioning that while noticing requirements in this presentation are to be implemented with a comprehensive update of the zoning ordinance by next summer, staff is looking into improving the noticing requirement experience for applicants prior to the update adoption next year. The city currently notifies property owners within 500 feet of projects that require public hearings, and those are projects such as rezones, use permits, and special use permits. The noticing requirements include first, signs. These signs are posted along the project site, usually along street frontages. And there's also a postcard that is sent to notify property owners within that buffer of an applicant-led neighborhood meeting, so they may express their feelings or thoughts on the project. Then once the project is ready for public hearings, city staff publishes a legal advertisement in the newspaper notifying property owners of this project. These signs are also updated once dates are ready for the public hearings, and an additional postcard is sent as well to those residents within that buffer. These notification methods are required by the state, except that the state requires municipalities notify property owners within 300 feet. The city of Goodyear has elected to notify property owners within 500 feet, expanding that buffer an additional 200 feet. In addition to the state requirements, projects are published in the city website, and neighborhood meetings are added to the calendar on the city website as well. In the initial phase of the zoning ordinance update process, it was identified that residents desire enhanced public notification. They want to be involved and be a part of the zoning and development process. The Planning Commission and City Council have also noted that of the importance of maintaining noticing requirements that support informed decision-making and adequately inform residents. Matt will now go over noticing requirements in more detail and recommendations for the zoning ordinance update.
Great. Thank you, Guadalupe. If you wanna, perfect. And we'll progress. So this slide, just as hopefully you start to get the cadence here, we presented the topic. Now, naturally, we wanted to go in and look at our benchmark comparisons. We have a timeline across the bottom, or I should say a distance across the bottom, that reflects how communities across the valley have variation in their notification distances, all the way from 300 feet to a quarter mile and plus. So if we go to our first assessment, we can see, as Guadalupe mentioned, the state of Arizona at 300 feet. And when we analyzed our benchmark communities against that 300 feet, you can see quite a few start to stack up and meet that baseline 300 feet notification. But as Guadalupe mentioned, we then started to look at other communities and what distances they may be looking at. And we see Goodyear at that 500 feet along with Mesa. So just above that baseline 300. We also have other communities that have looked at the 600-foot notification. And so City of Phoenix and Chandler have doubled, in essence, that notification. Now, I should qualify that these distances do fluctuate, just like signage, with some of the different applications and requests. The notifications might fluctuate a little bit from one municipality to the next, but overall, City of Phoenix and Chandler fall into that 600 feet. But from there, we start to see other communities that even have greater distances at 1,000 feet in Avondale. And then even other communities that we start to see have multiple distances. And that can be seen in Glendale, that based on the size of the project, they have different notifications. So if the project is 40 acres or less, it's 600 feet, and above 40 acres, it's 900 feet, and so on up to 1,200 feet. So that's another consideration that we evaluated, is understanding that different projects may have different posting requirements. City of Peoria, you can see, also has different notification boundaries, and the town of Queen Creek. So there's, as you can literally across the board, we have some communities that are at that baseline condition, some that even doubled that, and then others that considered the nuances of the request and have different standards for different submittal requests. So with those applications in mind, and understanding what Guadalupe was sharing of always looking at ways that the city can be more transparent and be a better informed residents, we wanted to throw additional consideration into the mix, and felt that there is a strong support to examine having Goodyear go to a baseline of 600 feet for notification. So going up 100 more feet to capture where other communities are also at, and doubling that minimum distance. But in unique situations, consider increasing notification to 1,200 feet. And those unique considerations might be if there's a rezone request that is going from multifamily to commercial, or a commercial to residential, for example, that in those more intensive conditions, that a greater notification distance might be considered. Another application that was also examined is proposing to formalize the HOA notification process. So right now, the city does a wonderful job of making sure that when notices go out at the 500-foot distance, that HOAs and their current contact is notified so that they can then disseminate it to their larger subdivision. But that is done in practice by staff. It's not codified in the code. And so we would also suggest that we would codify that and increase that notification to a minimum of 1,000 feet. So if we are looking at 600 feet, that HOAs within 1,000 feet would be noticed to capture additional notifications. So we have this next slide that helps visualize that. So naturally, we wanted to not just show you the distance, but show you what the total number would be if we stayed at that 500 foot. So this graphic shows the site, which has obviously the star on it, and the little lighter colored kind of rectangle there is the example site here, and the transparent blue boundary is that 500-foot buffer. And this exhibits 81 properties that would be notified in the current situation. If we increase that to 600 feet in alignment with the recommendation, you can see the same context, and that would increase that notification from 81 properties in this example to 104 properties. And then the last would be looking at that 1,200-foot recommendation. In this example here, you can see the larger boundary, and that takes that original 81 properties and increases that to 290 properties. And then we would just make note that that the city does collect and manage the cost for these postings at the application stage. So those costs are accounted for when the applicant does apply. With that, Mayor, I will turn it back over to you to see if there's any questions or comments about this scenario or the recommendations.
You know, I just want to start off, I think it never hurts to enlarge an area, because there's many times when people would come in and complain, hey, they didn't make notification of this. You know, I like the idea. I mean, I don't think you can go wrong by enlarging. That's just my 2 cents worth, and I'll throw it out to, go ahead, Laura.
I would say that probably one of the consistent areas of feedback we get from residents when they come in is that they weren't notified. Right. And no matter what boundary you set, there will be somebody who'll come back and say, I wasn't notified. So taking that into consideration, I think that we still need to address the transparency and the accessibility of providing that information to our residents. It's our accountability, really, to them. And it's interesting, you've got one standard for 600, and then an HOA standard for 1,000, and then a large project for 1,200. I don't know, in my mind, I think keeping one standard would really simplify things a lot. I think it's easier to explain to people, sorry, you're not in the 600 range, or sorry you missed it because this wasn't, but I just pick a number and maybe even 1,000 just to say that's going to be our new standard. I think it would definitely make it a lot easier. I do have a question about posted signs, but I don't know if I can cover that now, or if you wanted me to get back to it.
Is that part of this, or that'll be on the?
It's notification.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. the posted signs, you can see the sign and you know that something's coming, but when you drive by, you can't read it. And oftentimes there's nowhere you can safely pull off to go and take a look at that. And I'm not saying you have to write it to make it big enough that people can read it, but how can people find out the information that is on that sign by another means besides the newspaper article, the classifieds?
Great question. So if you see a sign out there that says public hearing or notice of public hearing, you can always go to our website. The Development Services website has a list of all the development applications that are going to require public hearing. So if you see a sign, instead of unsafely pulling over, the best way, if you can't scan the QR code that's on some of those signs, the website will give you all the information that's on the sign and more.
Okay. Is it easily accessible on the website? I mean, if you go to the landing page, if I'm a resident and I wanna find out that information, how hard is it gonna be for me to find it?
I think you could just type in goodyearaz.gov/dev apps, but it's a few clicks. You'd go to the Development Services, Planning and Zoning, and then there's one for the applications. But we can always take a look at if we can shorten that or add more accessible ways to get there.
Okay, that would be a great idea. And then also finding out how we might be able to promote that to the residents, because I know there is always a lot of interest when the sign goes up. But again, they're not always very accessible. So that would be great, and that's my feedback. Thank you.
JV?
Yeah, I would be in favor of one standard, because as Laura said, it's easier to explain to people, but we do get a lot of questions about not getting notified, and it's because they're not within the 500 feet. But I think if you take it one standard, that's easier to explain to people. This is our standard. The state says we can do this, but we've expanded it to this to help the residents. Goes a long way for us as a city.
Wally?
Okay, is there any way that we can address making the sign bigger, like Surprise makes their sign? Have you done a comparison of the planning and zoning notices that other cities do? Because I don't know that our signs are as large as some of the others.
We can take a look at that more closely.
That might help as well. I know that when I drive by Surprise, I can read what's going on and I'm still driving.
Okay.
But it's a big, huge sign. Also, I personally am not in favor of the 1,200. I would rather go 600 because that's twice what the required statutes say we have to do. And I think that is plenty. But then on the other hand, it's up to the HOA to notify. I don't ever recall getting anything from my HOA that anything was going on in a certain area of where I live, because I was not within the 300 or 500 feet. So I never heard about it. And it's up to them to notify. I don't think we can require them to notify all residents. So like Laura said, there's always going to be people that are going to say, I wasn't notified, I didn't know, didn't hear, didn't read, didn't do this. And, you just kind of have to bite the bullet sometimes. But that's my opinion. I think going 1,200 is a little overboard. And I think it might be difficult for some of these developers to get some of the zoning requirements that they need passed, because if, like I said, for 1,200 people, it's what, 800 folks, did you say, or 600?
290.
That's 1,200?
1,200 feet was 290.
All right, so let's say 300 people coming in saying they don't want something. So I know it's a tough decision. I don't know that we'll ever be right on any of them. For some of these residents, they just assume the whole city be notified. And we don't do that. We can't, it's cost prohibitive for us. So, I'll go along with everyone else, but I just don't, at this point, other than 600, I think that's plenty, but that's just my personal opinion. I'll go with anything else that the council wants.
This side? Good. Trey, you good? Okay. Next.
The next topic is permitted versus use permit uses. The zoning ordinance contains a list of uses that are already permitted in each zoning district. Those uses are considered compatible with the zoning district they're located within and can develop on the site following development conditions for that zoning district and following the administrative review process. Unlike permitted uses, there are uses that the city has identified as needing an additional permit, a use permit, or special use permit in order to develop in a specific zoning district. These uses are more intense in nature and have noise, light, odor, traffic, or other impacts that may need to be mitigated. However, the city may want to consider permitting these if there are certain conditions or protections that are met. These conditions and protections are identified in the review process for that additional permit and presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council for final approval. A list of the current use permits, special use permits in the zoning district was available as an attachment to the staff report if you would like to see the entire list. But considering the city's goals to streamline the development process where possible, with this comprehensive update, we are looking at use permit and special use permit uses that may be considered to be permitted outright or conditionally based on the context, location, or performance standards. This work session topic specifically focuses on whether the use permit process can be removed for some uses if there are conditions that are met and identified in the zoning ordinance update. Matt will now discuss the current and recommended use permit uses in each zoning category.
Thank you, Guadalupe. So I think the way we might approach these ones is we're gonna walk through three categories, right? The residential, commercial, and industrial conditions. And we'll pause at each one to get feedback. That way we don't have to remember all three to have a discussion. So the first, as you can see on the slide, is discussing current residential use permit uses. So within residential zoning districts, there's a series of uses that are permitted. What you see on this list are the uses that, if you're in a residential district, you would need to get a use permit in order to place or operate one of these uses. And so, as Guadalupe mentioned, our goal as part of modernizing the zoning code is to ask ourselves, well, with proper conditions that we write into the zoning code, could we just not allow these by right as opposed to having them go through an additional step? So here you can see the uses. I won't read them off one by one, but we'll go to the next slide, which is our recommendation of this list. These three highlighted in yellow, we would suggest that by applying specific controls on these uses that would be placed into the zoning code, that these could be allowed with conditions. And so, for example, under assisted living facility, we know what some of the conditions or issues are with assisted living. They often might have emergency vehicles that visit. They have obviously a larger footprint than maybe in a residential setting. And so we might have certain specifications on how close this might need to be to an arterial intersection so that it's not ambulance isn't making 10 turns through a residential neighborhood. Maybe we have spacing requirements from these so that we don't get a concentration of them in a neighborhood. And if we have those proper controls, do they need to actually go through the full process? And so similar, we have hospital application. That parentheses suggests that hospitals would be a permitted use only in the multifamily 18 or 24. It wouldn't be all residential types, but in those specific classifications. And then the same applies for sales or stands for agriculture produce. Same parentheses suggest that would be in ag, right? If we're in an ag, do they really need a use permit to sell produce in a stand? So with that, yes, I'll turn it over to council for questions.
I was just clarifying that. So you're saying the ones in yellow need to be permitted? You need to get a permit or not to have a permit for those?
We're recommending that if we put proper controls into the zoning code so that with the sale of agriculture, for example, we might put standards on how big can that stand be, how far does it have to be off the road, those types of, when can it operate? Those things could be placed into the zoning code and thus make that acceptable, as opposed to right now, they have to go through a special process to request a use permit from the council.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm okay with that. I have to make sure that we're flexible enough for like the kids selling lemonade on the corner or a farmer's market in a park or other things like that. I mean, so
in that situation, that would be a temporary use, and the zoning code does handle or control temporary uses through different process and procedures. So absolutely that is recognized, but as far as this application, that's a good point of clarification, that we're talking about the principal use of the property. So that would mean that these would have to be the primary, if you will, or initial use that's developed on the site.
okay, so if I have like a piece of dirt and I'm gonna have a farmer stand right there permanently, for example, then that would fall into potentially this where it's already built into the plan. And then the assisted living facility, that's already pretty well established within our
So we have,
guidelines, right?
the city does have conditions relative to assisted living, but those are considered through a use permit process. So so we would develop more maybe rigorous, if you will, to make sure that the same considerations are being applied. They just wouldn't necessarily go through that formal process. And we can take it many different ways. We can say, here are requirements. If you need to go beyond those requirements and request more flexibility, then we could maybe push them into the use permit process if they can't operate within the guidelines that the code suggests.
Okay, so we're not making them less rigorous or things like that with the assisted living, for example.
That would be the goal, I think, yes.
Okay, I think I'm good there. Thank you.
Wally?
About the group homes, they have to have permits now, right?
Yes, and this assisted living is for assisted living with 10 or more. If it's assisted living that is fewer than that, they go through our zoning ordinance today and have the zoning clearance letter and all of those things.
And that's totally clear. But what about the group homes?
Group homes is not being considered on this. A group home is permitted if they get a zoning clearance today. We amended the zoning ordinance about a year to 18 months ago to clarify that any group home between 1 and 10 would need to go through that zoning clearance process.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not loosening any of the, and I'm going to use the word control because I don't know another word to use, that we aren't able to make sure that we know what group homes are here, how many are in there, and the whole thing. Now, for the sales building or stand, the direct sales of ag products, what kind of permit does Cow Ranch have?
So they're actually retail sales.
Because they're using their own parking lot.
Correct. So they actually did a use permit, and we're going to actually talk about that one
Okay,
here
then
in the
let's
commercial
wait.
slide.
Let's
Yep.
wait for that because
Perfect.
it's really important that we allow them to do that if we can, so that they can have space for their products.
Yes. This is more like, let's say you have a 5-acre property, you live on the property, and you grow some tomatoes, and you want to sell tomatoes. Eggs. Yes.
Good?
I'm done, thank you.
Trey?
All right, where do we draw the line, I guess, in treating differently the group home versus the assisted living? You mentioned with the assisted living how the requirement is for emergency services to, you don't want them to be weaving in and out. To my knowledge, group homes also have a history of requiring very similar services. So I guess the second part to that is, what exactly is the process for the list in white as well compared to the list in yellow? Like you said, one's a permit versus a use permit. Can you get into a little bit of what exactly that difference is? And then my secondary question on that will be, why treat assisted living and group home differently, if, a primary cited reason here is, constant emergency services visits?
So this assisted living is more about state licensed facilities that are having individuals in those homes that might need meal services and things like that. I think the key here is more than 10. If we get into less than 10 and group homes and assisted living and things of that, we're getting more into some fair housing type things where we want to provide opportunities for those individuals to live in neighborhoods and not be overly concentrated. So what we're really talking about here in making this permitted is, if you think about like that facility on Wigwam and near Bullard, there's an assisted living facility there, and it went through a use permit process. Estrella, what's it called? Estrella Estates. They went through a process to get permitted there. So we can look at some of the conditions that were in that use permit and codify them to make it conditionally permitted if they meet certain criteria. But today, if we go back, all these uses here, if they're going in any residential district, they need to go through that extra entitlement step of getting a use permit, where we're creating the conditions of approval uniquely each time. But it's our recommendation that we feel that we have enough experience seeing these these three uses in a community setting that we could attempt to craft some conditions that would be, if you meet these conditions, you're permitted.
Okay, and then I had one more just on kind of the definitions between home daycare and daycare facility, if these are all in residential. I get it, they're use permits. Since it's up there, I'm kind of curious on how we delineate between those, and then what sort of, I watch my neighbor's kids during the day. At what point are we attempting to step in here?
I can jump in and start. Great comments, and actually Arizona revised statute does acknowledge those nuances from understanding how many kids you may babysit or watch at your home. There's a condition for that, but then once you meet a certain threshold then you become a home daycare that you need to get additional certifications for. And so that example would be a home daycare situation. You're in a residential house that has a principal or primary use, and daycare a component of that. The daycare facility would then be the standalone, right? That it's the no, it's actually a tutor time, or a daycare facility that is built to serve more than probably even 10 kids. And so, you can see the difference there is a home daycare situation versus a full-blown kind of business.
Okay, so those are allowed with just a permit, not a zoning change within a residential area?
It's a use permit, so it's not a zoning change, but it is almost like an entitlement process.
Yes.
And then back on the home daycare thing, you mentioned the Arizona revised statutes. Are we pretty much in line with that, or are we adding anything on top of that?
At the present time, we're in alignment and not adjusting that.
Okay, answers what I have, thank you.
Okay. Laura?
Okay, I have a question on the assisted living also. You explained that it would be more than 10 and involves care and things like that. But can you tell me, does that include the behavioral health and the sober living?
So we can pretty much make definitions as specific as we need them to be, but in this situation, the sober living per state statute would be a separate condition. The behavioral health I'll be honest, I need to do a little bit more research on that to, because in an assisted living capacity that may exist, I just would have to, get a little bit more confirmation on
Okay.
the nuances between that.
Great. I'd appreciate if you would do that additional research. Now, earlier Estrella Estates was mentioned. That's a business, like a commercial center, is that correct? As opposed to what I'm thinking in a residential as a home setting of assisted living. So can you clarify what you mean by assisted living in terms of, is it a business or is it a business within a home?
The Estrella Estates is like a large building with multiple residential units there, and the senior population lives there.
Mhm.
It's like a business that has people living there, though.
Okay.
And typically what we'd also see as a qualifying difference is once you hit that threshold of 10 or more, statute as well as licensing requires certain health and safety measures that most conditions you would not see a homeowner doing to their house. Whereas a facility that size, because of the building code or other requirements, kind of push it into a standalone
Okay.
facility outside of a home. Because in theory, your question is correct. You could have a home that might be large enough to support that many people,
Mhm.
but then they would have to do a lot of other health and safety upgrades that then usually causes it to be
Well,
costly.
I guess it depends on the market, like anything else. I mean, that's a possibility. So if you would do that additional.
The checks and balances,
Yeah,
sure.
that additional research. And then I have a question about hospitals. I mean, I asked this earlier, Ironwood, it's a cancer treatment center. I understand they don't have stayover facilities, so that would not be considered a hospital. Is that-
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
But hospitals are pretty big, usually have a big footprint and a big impact. And I was thinking about, what about behavioral hospitals? Behavioral health. There in Avondale, there's a facility called Copper Springs. And I know that when that came in, it was pretty controversial. And so does this contemplate those types of facilities?
We'll definitely do some more digging into the definitions and nuances there as it relates to what is a hospital as we're getting our zoning code cleaned up, and what is behavioral health.
All right, so we'll discuss it again.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks.
Anybody else on this subject? No? Okay, next one.
All right. Moving right along here. So here we have current commercial uses. So these are within the commercial zoning districts. These are all the use types that require a use permit. So then under the same application, the uses in yellow here are conditions where we think with proper conditions placed on these, codified in the code, that they could be allowed in select conditions without a use permit. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to council to give any thoughts on these specific uses.
Question? Benita?
Yeah, so I'm confused with the two daycares. So you mentioned a commercial daycare earlier as a residential, and then this daycare here, I'm confused as the difference in the two. That's number one. And number two, I personally would not be in favor of daycare not having a use permit.
And the daycare here is the same daycare in residential. It's just when you get into a commercial district, it would then be, per this recommendation, permitted to go in without a use permit.
It's just me personally, I'm just not in favor of that.
Okay, anybody else? Go ahead.
Okay, so what is studios for the practice and sale of fine arts? What's that?
It's,
Like Catitude?
could be a Catitude, our art ceramics
Okay.
place.
It sounds good. I mean, I'm not against it, but I didn't know quite what it was. That would definitely encourage, hopefully, artists to come into a city and open one of their their places so that they could display arts and,
Galleries, things like
yeah,
that.
and I love the outdoor seating because 9 times out of 10, we do have the weather that would permit that, and everyone loves an outdoor seating area. So,
And this is your Cal Ranch question here.
yes, it is, and I just think it's really important that we do allow that, otherwise we're going to not have that business in our city. We just did this for Tractor Supply too.
Correct.
And a lot of people forget that we really have agriculture all around us, even though they think we're building all this stuff and the farms are going away. But the farmers depend on some of these businesses, and they come into Goodyear because they know they carry specific brands that they need to run their operations. So I really am, I know we had, remember that conversation? Yes, he does, sir. We had long conversations over Cal Ranch and how to decorate it and how to make it, the fence look good and this, that, and the other. And I never got a complaint from anyone that it didn't look good because you just really forget it's even there when you're driving through. And if you're not looking for a trough for a horse, you don't go in there and look.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
but I just appreciate you doing that because it's really important that we are flexible with some of these businesses that come in.
And it's those conversations you've had about how it looks that gives staff the confidence that if it were to be conditionally permitted, we can take what your detailed conversations were and rinse and repeat. Because in all honesty, the Tractor Supply STIPs are nearly 100% Cal Ranch. So that's the model.
You can thank the mayor for that one.
So that's the model, Mayor. So that's why we want to
Good.
put this in zoning code.
Good,
So
thank
those
you.
businesses can open quicker.
Good, go ahead.
Well, what are you calling institutions?
Those would be schools that are not regulated by the state of Arizona.
Okay, trying to think of an example, what that would be.
And a private school that's not a charter or a public district school.
Okay,
That'd be an example of
and
institution.
they need to use, those white ones don't need a use permit. So.
Correct.
Okay, okay, and those would then come to us, use
Correct.
permits, so. Okay, I think I'm good then. Thank you.
Anything else? We all good? Okay, keep them rolling.
So then we get to industrial, and so you can see the list is a little shorter under industrial, but if you start to look at some of these lists, they're get a little more intensive. We also see some of those terminology that, as Christian mentioned, getting a little dated there. So I would clarify, as was brought up on the last slide, that not part of this conversation, but of course as part of modernizing the zoning code, we'll be updating these terminologies, revisiting the definitions so that institution is cleaned up and clarified, that tannery maybe is not necessarily a standalone use and can be lumped in with some other uses. But that aside, you can see on this particular one that there's not, because of the intensive nature of a lot of these uses and the nuances that might exist, there's not a lot of uses under the industrial categories that we would recommend place that we could permit under certain conditions. We did identify one, though, dwelling for a watchman or caretaker employed on the premise. So if it is a use that requires 24-hour surveillance, that right now placing a watchman caretaker, like at a storage facility or something like that, would require a use permit. And do we need to, if the use itself is okay, does that need a use permit? I'll just also make the comment about new uses. As I mentioned, we'll update uses and terms to modernize the code. We'll also be introducing new uses, and we are not in a position to make any recommendations on these particular uses, but we put them on the slide just so that we let the council know these are examples of uses that are top of mind with us that are going to be included into the code. But as far as this topic and this evening, just one area for discussion. I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor and Council.
Trey.
Yes, seeing this on industrial kind of sparked something, and I guess it relates to the other one. Say, I'm an industrial user with, employing my workers, and I have a sandwich shop on there. Does that require a use permit, or does, if I was going to sell, almost turn into a commercial that is not only, for example, not only open to my employees, but if you were driving by and you wanted to stop by, Big Steel Sandwich Shop or whatever, I don't know. Does that require a use permit? Do we allow that via permit? Or I guess the same could be said for, you mentioned the agricultural with residential. If somebody knows, hey, you can come by and buy tamales from my house, does that then trigger any issues when it comes to permitting? Do we allow it? Do we require a permit? It's kind of a more macro level question here, but as it relates specifically to this slide, say I had a Big Steel shop and wanted to sell sandwiches. Is that possible?
So to answer the first part about industrial, their I-1 allows certain retail uses. So the way I would determine that, I don't have the latest, greatest zoning in front of me, but you would need to have, our zoning, let me say this first. Our zoning code does not build upon itself. So if you have industrial, it doesn't allow every commercial use and every residential use. It doesn't go by the most intense allows everything less intense. So it has to be explicitly called out in the zoning ordinance to permit it. So what we would do is look at, does industrial allow restaurant? Like, does I-2 allow restaurant? I believe the answer to that is no, it does not allow restaurant. So if you're doing another principal use in your building, it would need to be a principal use in the zoning code.
Do we do overlays in Goodyear? Are we allowed, how you mentioned there's one layer, do we allow, any secondary, or is it just the principal use?
It's the principal use and any use that's analogous to that principal use. So if you're running a machine shop that does metal work, it doesn't just permit a restaurant to also go in that facility. It'd be based on the underlying industrial zoning, and doesn't permit that. There are some PADs that are set up to do that, but that is not the common case.
Is that based on our policy, or does that come in conflict at all with state law? Do you know?
It is not against state law for us to permit that. The next question would be building code, and does that make sense that an industrial use would permit something that's more sensitive like food production?
Okay. My general thought in that is, obviously it's rare and it's, honestly hypothetical. I'm not speaking towards a specific thing, but I could imagine, we have industrial zoning, there's light industrial zoning, and, next to light industrial, you also have, say, a coffee shop and a deli. I know that gets into mixed use zoning as well, but I didn't know how easy it would be for someone to perhaps do something like that, if we would even allow it, and if we don't, could we, or anything like that. Again, this is all hypothetical, and same thing would happen with commercial being, I don't know, I'm selling something, can I manufacture something in the back? Or residential, I serve tamales, or I serve, I have a really cool espresso machine. You want to come buy some coffee?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. Obviously, at some point, it would have to trigger our attention to say, hey, no, you can't do that. But I also want to be able to use a little bit of common sense to where, hey, I want to sell tamales. Is that really our job to get involved?
So for the business park district is a good example, though, of where there's light manufacturing and warehousing allowed in a setting, and you can also have food establishments. So that would be an example of, if somebody said I wanted to open a shop or restaurant and do some light manufacturing, that's where that business park district is, which is really meant to be a bridge between heavier industrial uses that might have chemicals, manufacturing of heavy equipment, things of that nature, where you may not want the general public just intermixing in a more industrial setting. But the way that somebody could do that, if they came to us with a comprehensive plan, would either be zoned to a district such as that, or provide a PAD. And in a lot of industrial zonings, you'll see industrial immediately adjacent to commercial. So those commercial uses will go next to those.
Okay, and then what about a currently zoned residential?
It's currently zoned residential. That is where you get into the home business area. And I know there's some laws about cooking things in your home, but that's where you want to balance that between causing a lot of traffic into a neighborhood that might be more akin to a restaurant setting.
So that, yeah.
Is there a process by which someone could do that? Obviously, it's gonna come into state law. I used the tamale example, not reminiscing that, you know, we've had some fun with that over the last couple of years as a state. But you know, as a hypothetical, like, is that just technically illegal, or would we have a way to allow it?
No, I mean, I think Christian addressed it, that that situation in a residential home would be considered a home occupation. And the tamale bill, as it was referred to, that has guidelines to allow for selling food out of your home, but controlling, as Christian mentioned, how big your kitchen can be, and making sure that the primary use still stays a residential use and does not become a de facto restaurant.
Does that require a permit, or is that just generally allowed?
You would still need a business license, and you need a zoning, through the business license process. When you come in for that, planning also evaluates that to ensure that you're not generating more traffic than would be typical in a residential setting. Because at that point, you're effectively operating a commercial business in the middle of a neighborhood.
Okay, but we would essentially still allow it as long as they came in and got that, hey, I have maybe 5 to 10 people come by a day.
We have those in the city
do
today,
something
yes.
like that.
Yep.
You know, we can make that work. We're not just going to stand in the way and start saying no.
Yep, we have those
Okay.
today in the city, yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Looking around, I see none. Up next.
All right, and our final topic for the focus of tonight's conversation is expanding and diversifying our housing options within Goodyear's zoning framework. This is related to your strategic plan. One of the city's goals is to provide current and future residents with a variety of housing types, prices, sizes, and ownership types. And in order to assist in accomplishing this, we're utilizing this zoning ordinance update process to evaluate if more housing types and options are appropriate. As part of the legislation passed by the state, the city completed a housing study at the end of calendar year 2024. The study was done by a reputable group, the Elliott Pollock and Company, and the study concluded, drumroll please, that the city currently exceeds the demand for housing, both in single-family and multifamily housing categories, based on the great work of this council and working with the private development community for the foreseeable future. We have about 5 years. We're on track for about the next 5 years of housing at a minimum. And we're able to now share in the regional demand for housing and employment growth and keep our workforce within the city. As a side note, there's also a new middle housing bill that the state legislature enacted, which you'll be seeing some zoning ordinance text amendments come before you in December to address some of those concerns so that we meet the December 6th guideline. There are also bills that were passed that impact cities of 150,000 residents or more. And with the rapid growth of Goodyear, I'm hearing a rumor that we're now sitting around 122,000. We know that we might as well account for those provisions in this rewrite, because we'll be back before you know it with including those provisions. So we'll be including those provisions of cities over 150,000 in this process to get on board with what the state would like us to do. I'll also show you, as part of this conversation, this chart. This chart shows the last several years and the impact of the rezoning requests that this council has approved, the preliminary plats and final plats that this council and staff had administered. The 2025 column is just the first half of 2025. And what this is showing is that in the dark blue, that was our housing units that were completed that were single family. As you'll see as we go from left to right, the diversity of our housing stock has increased to account for more multifamily townhomes, more single-family townhomes, and more multifamily in general. So our housing balance, and for anybody at the state that's listening or listening, we have done a great job of diversifying our housing product, even without the legislature kind of stepping in. But this is just a chart that illustrates how we are still producing housing despite some rumors of a slowdown, and we're generating a lot of units that are getting filled, and our population is growing as an impact of that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt to talk about more opportunities for housing diversity.
Okay, thank you, Christian. So where we're going with this is housing needs need to continue to evolve. It's important that our zoning code supports a range of residential formats, as Christian outlined, to show that we're recognizing the challenges that we face, whether it be demographics, affordability, or just lifestyle preferences. So with this discussion, we want to first begin by looking at what residential use types currently are allowed in Goodyear's agriculture and single-family residential use classification. So I would emphasize that what you're seeing on this chart in the zoning districts are listed across the top, and the different types of residential applications or construction types are listed along the left-hand side. And so we're just focusing for this conversation this evening on agriculture and single family. Multifamily will be a separate conversation. And so you see on the slide, the X's identify what residential use type is allowed in each specific zoning category. And so one of the things you might take away from this slide is this is, again, what Goodyear has today. You may notice that those zoning types pretty much are single zoning types, that one residential product type is allowed in one zoning district. So here we'll start to outline the different residential types to help you visualize, what is a single family detached, attached, duplex, and so on and so forth. And hopefully that just gives a little bit of context. So here we have our single family detached, and of course this ownership stat, or the typical manner of ownership, is privately owned. For the most part, it's placed on the ground, and as you can see, it's currently allowed in all our single family districts except for R1A. And so as part of and we'll show a table to summarize this at the end, but as part of our recommendations, we're not suggesting that single-family detached uses, in essence, get introduced to any other zoning districts. They're allowed in most single-family districts, so there's not a lot of room there in terms of adding to that. Now we have single-family attached. So here, again, same ownership, right? That it's privately, or in most instances, privately owned. It's on the ground again. So you have, in the top condition, you have 2 units where just the garage is attached. In the bottom example, you have, it shows where, the kind of entire maybe length of the unit is attached to the adjacent unit. But in this situation, a single family attached is only allowed in the R1A, or attached zoning district. Now, this is a catch here that we're recommending, as you can see from these photos, that this use type, if managed correctly and ensured that it doesn't, get too large in terms of how many units are attached, that it could be allowed in, of course, the R1A, R14, R16, and R2 zoning districts. And this is simply to start to look at those ways to make some of those zoning districts a little bit more flexible, instead of just having one residential use type that is allowed, which in essence, if any project wants to propose a different residential model type, they have to almost get a rezone, right? If it's not, they're in a single family and it's not a single family detached product, for example. So here we are making some recommendations that this type of product could be introduced into other zoning districts. Now, here's another situation where we have 3 units attached. and on the bottom, even 4 units. And so as you can imagine, this starts to look a little bit more intense compared to the prior example where there was just 2 units attached. And so here we're recommending that these are allowed, of course, in the R1A, as I mentioned before, but that these would continue to be allowed in the R1A and R2 zoning districts. So that R2 is the bridge kind of where we start to get into multifamily. And so that's why we're thinking that the R2 could support a little bit more density as we start to transition from full single family to multifamily. Now here we have 2-family or duplex. And so this is slightly different than the other examples, simply from the status that we have a condo consideration here, where you might have 2 units on 1 lot, as the top example shows. So it's really 1 lot that's common owned, and then the units are actually owned. The bottom example is a stacked condition where you actually have a condo, an ownership of airspace, if you will, in the top unit, and then the bottom unit, of course, is on the ground and it's on a common lot. And so this example, again, is slightly different from the attached because of that condo application and the fact that you can have stacked units as opposed to everything being on the ground. So this example is currently only allowed in R2, and we're not making recommendations to expand that into any other zoning districts. So now, apologize for getting a little nuanced here and complex, but as Christian mentioned, we have some new legislature that's coming before you about missing middle or middle housing. And in that statute, there is definitions and references to triplexes and fourplexes. And so we are introducing these because they are not currently captured as a type within the Goodyear zoning district. So we would be introducing this with a definition, and in essence, we're not recommending that this type would be allowed in any single family application. So we're showing it for context because you're gonna see it in a upcoming presentation so that you know we're accounting for it, but because it can start to come a little bit more intense because of the size and the transient maybe possibility of occupancy, that we're not recommending any change to the single family. Now, multifamily, we would start to see these being permitted or allowed, but in this instance, no change because they're currently not allowed. And then, of course, we have our manufactured homes. And maybe going back to Christian's box of different mementos, manufactured homes back in the day certainly had a style to them. But now we start to see some very sophisticated and very nice manufactured homes. And so, of course, we have manufactured conditions that are ownership, that they're on the ground. Currently, their manufactured homes are only allowed in manufactured zoning districts. So they are also, in essence, a single use. And so at this present time, we're exploring the recommendation of if a manufactured home can meet the same design standards that a single-family detached home would meet, would we or could we allow them as a permitted use type in at least the AG and AU zoning districts, which are our agriculture districts, which we all recognize maybe in southern Goodyear when you're in a more rural area. They're looking to put a residential type on that, and again, if it meets certain standards, would that be an acceptable application? And so with that, I'll show a reminder of the original table we looked at and all of the residential types we just discussed, where they currently are allowed in terms of zoning districts, and then what this would look like under our recommendations. So you can see that the biggest change is really in those middle housing, right, types. So we have under the attached, where right now it's just one type attached. Now it's, can we qualify the different types under that one, a 2-unit condition versus a 3 or 4 plus? And then, as I mentioned, the additional inclusion of considering triplex and fourplex, but that there is no recommendation there because we see that as being more suitable for multifamily. So with that, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you, Council.
Before I tee it up for Trey, because I know he's gonna be on this one here, is me and Benita were over at the Walk for Hope, right? This weekend. Among a lot of doctors, and I keep hearing this all the time, what we're lacking, executive housing. And I don't know how we address it, so with that, I'm gonna tee it up for Trey.
Well, that's one of my questions going that way. I was there on Friday talking with administrators for, City of Hope. I've heard it from Abrazo, I've heard it from Banner. And it's not just the medical field, it's a lot of high-tech STEM jobs. We have that in our industrial sector. We have it all over the city now. And for us to be able to attract more, let alone for those businesses to recruit top-notch employees, that executive housing, potentially custom homes, decent-sized lots. I guess right now they only fit in the AGAU sector, but that's very limited. Christian, I know I've asked you before, but I guess to get that started, the R110 zoning, to my knowledge, we do not have a single plot in Goodyear zoned as such. Is that correct?
We do not have a zone that is hard zoned R110, no.
Okay. And this rewrite, is that keeping that in our zoning code, or is it taking it out?
It's keeping it in our zoning code, and I will also let you know that there are PADs that rely on this, and some PADs that have flexibility to them, such as Estrella, that might rely on being able to utilize that as their base zoning.
Okay, good. I wanted to draw attention to that. That was something, I think our meeting was way back in March, so I was kind of newer here than I am now. But that was something, I've heard from back then until now. I know as we expand as a city further south, the idea of making sure we have that wide diversity of housing, and I think diversity of housing and having a wide portfolio of housing should include not only apartments, multifamily, condos, townhomes, that missing middle, as you were talking about, and your R14, R17, suburban neighborhoods we have all over the city. But I think it should also include that other end of the spectrum to where doctors aren't told, oh, you can go live in Verrado, or you can go live in Litchfield Park. We should have, or business owners, or what have you, that there should be places in Goodyear. And I think as we look towards our general plan and strategic plan and updates to that, I know we've talked about this before, but I wanted to utilize this as a point to kind of emphasize that in this setting. It's a missing end piece that we don't have in this city that I think we desperately need. And then on top of that, you had mentioned at the beginning of the section when it came to the apartment buildings and multifamily, how we've grown over the last 5-6 years. And you referenced legislation that is kind of, I won't say why, we do it because, you need that wide portfolio of housing. But that legislation coming from the state, that would require, or that would end up with more apartments than what we're having, or are they trying to reduce, what is that legislation attempting to, because you reference it as part of why we've seen such an uptick in the past few years. Would that legislation, I know has passed in various forms, would that end up with more apartment housing throughout the city? Would we be able to slow that down? Would we have a say? Or can you speak a little bit to that and why we are kind of where we are with the apartment situation?
I would say that there is some legislation that its goal is to allow more duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. And the area of the city that that legislation would target, I would say we've already done a good job of being ahead of the state in doing that. I guess my point really was that the state is creating legislation as a one-size-fits-all. And I think that through the work of this council, you all have already recognized the importance of housing and employment in the city. And I think our numbers going back to 2017 show that work. Whereas in the, more recently, the state's been passing that legislation, and we're already seeing the results of the work that this council and previous councils have done to get diversity of housing.
Okay, I appreciate that. I know, we have a pretty good relationship when it comes to some of our state legislators, and I just wanted to point to the fact that, a lot of what the state has been complaining about cities with red tape, not allowing for housing, not allowing for diversity of housing, when they take that one-size-fits-all approach, it at times could have a negative consequence to where it, you could see more apartments, condos going up without the city being able to implement design standards or various safety regulations, things like that. Whereas the city of Goodyear, we've kind of been a little bit ahead of that curve, and demonstrating not only to our residents but to the state, there's quite a bit of a housing shortage. That we're doing our part. We can point to where we've done our part, and I just kind of wanted to highlight that for whoever's listening. At times, I can get accused of building apartments on the weekend or, something like that. I'm sure you've heard something similar. But as a city, we've done better than most while working with, not only our local representation, but, leadership as a whole at the state level, and ensuring that we stay ahead of the curve to be able to tell our story, to hopefully not get caught up in those unintended consequences. So I don't think there was a question there. I was just wrapping up.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate the more options and flexibility for more owner-occupied uses. To your point, I think we have almost 20% now of our housing stock is apartments, the 122,000 people that we have. So yeah, to your point, I think we have been doing quite a bit, but I'd like there's more options. We don't have any condos. We don't have any as much owner-occupied options, and I think having those would be great. I definitely like to have more of those in the city as well. So yeah, especially executive housing. I've talked to a lot of physicians and doctors and people like that, and they don't want to live in multifamily. They want a home, so that they can own and build wealth in. So, and then also condos are a great option for people just starting out too, that they can build wealth also, or the court homes also. So I think those are great options also. I think we only have one condo, and that's the Pyramids. So I'd like to get more options for all those owner-occupied type options. So yeah, that's all I got right now. So thank you. I did see my first fourplex rental for sale in Goodyear, so that was interesting. So,
Vicki?
I'm with Brandon on the executive housing. We've been talking about that for a couple of years now, so I'm hoping we can start moving forward with some of that. I have another question, which is kind of out there, but I wondered if you know. You might not, and if you don't, that's okay. How much ag land do we have left in Goodyear? Because we've used a lot of it. And so roughly how much is left? Do you know?
We actually have a lot, but it's not all being farmed. So a lot of the deserts to the south of Riggs Road are all zoned AG, AU, or they're PAD holding for Amaranth. But we still do have a substantial amount that's still zoned ag.
What about being farmed?
It's diminishing, absolutely. You have West Goodyear, which is slowly diminishing in its agricultural production, and basically Riggs Road is kind of, there's some
So
scattered.
not a lot.
Not a lot.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Wally?
I have a couple comments. I would like to see more multi-generational housing. We're reaching a point now where folks are bringing their parents to live or vice versa. And I was out at Vistancia last week and saw some beautiful homes, and I think we could do the same thing. But now, of course, we're talking about how we need all this, but if the developers aren't gonna come out here and build them, we're not gonna get them. So we can't pay them to come out here, although we hopefully can woo them enough that we've got this beautiful view or whatever and get them out here. And also, I was in Mesa 3 weeks ago in a manufactured home that was absolutely stunning, stunning. And it's a whole, you don't even know that you're in a manufactured home area because it is so unique and so beautiful. And I don't want us to discord that and stick them all out in the ag thing if we eventually someday think that we can house them somewhere so that we have the snowbirds that come, like so many of the other counties. They, like, we were down in Vernon, they had them there. They're wonderful. People love them. They rent them out when they're not there. So I just want, we're pretty diversified, but we could do a little bit better. And the fourplexes are wonderful. We've owned fourplexes for 50 years and we love them. We have great tenants. They pay very well and they are upkept. So, and people love that because they don't want to have to take care of the yard or pay the, HOA fees or whatever. So I'm encouraged that maybe we could get some of those McEwen built.
Laura?
Well, you've done a lot of work to prepare this and appreciate it. And I really like where you are able to use Goodyear examples for the pictures. That always makes it extra special. Looking at, for the executive housing, if I look on the strat pan, it's your office that has responsibility. So I would imagine there's a multifaceted approach to this, including ECDEV and things like that. It won't necessarily fall to the zoning. Great, but okay. Just wanted to clarify. Manufactured homes, they've come a long, long way and they look really good. Tell us about what parks we have here and does this impact any zoning? And could there, to Wally's point, could there be additional parks permitted?
Absolutely. So this chart here is just focusing on the single family district, and there's a little bit of a nuance in the zoning code that manufactured homes are considered multifamily in zoning code today. That may change as we move forward. But there are 3 parks. One is Canada Village. That is single lots, individual single manufactured homes on them, and they own their homes, or the typical ownership is owned. Then you have Destiny RV Park, which is over on Citrus and Van Buren, which has those more like park models as well as RVs. And then last but not least, you have Cotton Lane RV Park, and that has a mix of park models and RVs that are parked there. So we do have 3 parks, and we have 2 districts that would allow those types of products. So Canada Village is MHS, Manufactured Home Subdivision, and then you have the Mobile Home Park / RV Park, and that's a different district, the other 2.
Yeah, even some of my peers are getting more interested in that as an option when your kids are grown and maybe the dog's gone. It's just you looking for something where you don't have a yard but you still own something. And I think that those have come a long way, that they don't have the same stigma. Now, manufactured homes, let's talk about Mobile. So this would be permitted, they're ag down there.
All of the southern Goodyear area is largely AG or AU zone, so 1 acre lots, 5 acre lots. This would impact that area and permit these structures there. It would also permit them in, say, for example, Wade Acres. I know there's some vacant lots in Wade Acres, and Wade Acres is not an HOA. So if you have an acre lot or greater, you could do a manufactured home that meets our design guidelines.
Okay. And there wasn't any discussion about it, but certainly it's seen in the news and even in Phoenix about tiny homes or container homes, tiny home villages and things like that. So any thought about those housing options?
So there's typically those are manufactured homes that are HUD certified. So if and we do not dictate the minimum house size. We dictate lot sizes. So if somebody wanted to put a tiny home per this zoning code on a AG or AU lot, they could have one tiny home on a 5-acre lot if they wanted to. But what this does is allow options, but I don't foresee particularly a bunch of tiny homes emerging based on this change, unless they did a mobile home RV park and did those there.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say thank you for this presentation. It was the most interesting one for me this evening. And I have had others come to me. The big thing that they have talked about was condos. But bringing more condos for young people that are able to purchase condos after getting out of school or having worked a couple of years, being able to stay in Goodyear but having a condo. And I have heard seniors more interested in condos as opposed to owning homes. Thank you.
Vicki?
Laura just reminded me of something. Since Joe and Brandon and I are both, we've been talking about executive housing for a while. In fact, for at least a year or so. And so if it does come out of the city manager's office, is that what we're saying, the majority of that? Have we done anything about that?
That's in the strategic plan, and I believe it's fiscal year 27. We had it up there. But it is in
Could
the
we-
strategic plan that council adopted.
Can we pull that up again?
Yes.
It says for 27, so when would we start looking at that? Now?
Could start now, but it is due by the end of fiscal year 27.
Okay, my hope would be as we get on it and start looking at it now, correct? So we can start, because we're all saying this is something that we need, and so we should be on it, not waiting till 27.
We will work on this and make sure it's done in time.
Okay, that doesn't really answer my question, but that's fine.
Anything else? Are you done?
I was just gonna say oopsie.
No, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Very
We're done. And if you guys want any additional follow-up one-on-ones to discuss them at top, if you look through the materials and you have another question, always happy to help. Just let Wynette know, and we're always happy to make ourselves available.
Before you go, did you get the proper feedback you needed from all of us? You guys feel good about that?
Thank you for the
Yeah,
dialogue.
thank you. We appreciate
Okay,
it.
well, thank you then.
Don't
Um,
forget your typewriter.
All right, now, there be no further business discussed. This meeting is adjourned. We will stay in this room and move into a special meeting. I'd like to call the special meeting order for November 3rd, 2025. City Clerk, please read the roll.
Let the record reflect all members are present.
All right, a vote may be held to call an executive session for the following pursuant to ARS 38-431.03, A, 3, and 4, for legal advice and consultation to consider its position and to provide instruction and direction city attorney and city manager regarding city's position in connection with contracts that are subject to negotiation associated with the GSQ project. Pursuant to ARS 38-431.03, A, 3, for legal advice and consultation with city attorney regarding the Goodyear Housing Rehab Program. Can I get a motion in a second?
So move.
Got a motion in a second. Did you get that? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed? The ayes have it. We'll go into executive session. How long do you need to get